And now in this final morning session, we're going to have 4 extraordinary stories about how to thrive. As you've probably ascertained, the reset, survive, thrive, they all sort of merge into one another because the people who are thriving have had to survive, have had to reset, have had to reframe, and now they've come out the other end with terrific stories to tell about how they managed the pandemic. So may I introduce to you on the panel, on my far right, your left, first of all, Jeremy Berthoux of Home Council Reallocation, Nouran Zarroug of New Light Consultancy, James Conigliaro of Dwell Works, and Louise Neal of Easy Tiger Research. A warm welcome for our panelists, please. Now, at any point, feel free if there's a question really that you want to ask, but these are sort of standalone stories, and unless you want to ask questions, I'd really like people to tell their tale, although sometimes things they say may really impact you and you might want to say something, and I'm sure then feel free at the end of the session to put the question, but these are really terrific stories in their own right. Jeremy, now, tell us your story about what happened. First of all, everybody will have had the same issue. The pandemic struck. And you're in the global mobility relocation space, and obviously we're all whinging about hospitality. We're looking at airlines not going, but this is obviously an industry that's going to be impacted. You saw your volumes plummet, and you realized you had to regroup. Yeah. So as we're talking about things in a volatile world that change and the things around you that you can't in any way sort of manage, there are always things that you can manage. And so you defaulted, as we often do, to the things that are key to you, and those values for you were quality and loyalty and solidarity. Yes. So what happened? I mean, tell me how that manifested. It's easy to say these abstract things like quality, loyalty, solidarity. We often talk about them and we give them a little tick and we laminate them and stick them on the boardroom wall, and then we do nothing about them. How did they really manifest? How did you live those values during the pandemic?
So as you said, Francis, volumes plummeted. I got locked down at home with my 4-month-old baby as well.
Oh, jolly.
Yeah. So that was another set of challenges, but yeah, those are the values of the company, and those have been the values of the company for the past 30 years. So in a time of dire need, that's when you have to fall back on those. And for us, it meant keeping our team, keeping our consultants also, well, afloat during this most difficult of times. And that meant also trying to adapt to a new world, trying to digitize our services, trying to help those assignees that were stuck in France or trying to come back to France as well. And really it was coming together and regrouping, as you said, in order to really try to first survive and then thrive. So that meant at first surviving, but then we had to project ourselves into a long-term vision. What was the industry going to be like? What was our company going to be like? And how were we able, how were we going to make it and that we were able to continue thriving in this new world? So my vision was that, well, having a 4-month-old baby, sustainability took on a whole other sense. And that was a great time for me to, get on those long-term projects, provide the company and the staff with a long-term vision. So that's when we embarked on a journey to sustainability, also a journey to digitization of our services. With our hands were forced, obviously, but it was really an opportunity. The Chinese symbol for risk is also the one for opportunity. So yes.
Crisis,
yes,
opportunity.
Exactly. So that's how I got into this pandemic. Hopefully that's how I will and we will get out of it as well. And that was really a good opportunity in that sense.
Do you know what? Once upon a time, and many of you who know me know that I used to work as an international conference interpreter, and because I had sort of foreign office clearance, I used to work for a prime minister we once had in the United Kingdom, Mrs. Thatcher, who was famous for saying things like, no such thing as problems, only opportunity. Till one day her special advisor from the Foreign Office, Charles Pole, rocked in and said, Prime Minister, I think we have an insurmountable opportunity. So I think the pandemic, although you're smiling and your demeanour is so clearly positive and optimistic, Jeremy, I think this was an insurmountable opportunity and you did make the best of it because you have skated over. I know you spent sleepless nights. You had 16 people and you did not want to let any one of them go. Because as we know, when one person is made redundant, it's not just one person, it's one person's family whose plans and strategies and expectations have gone down the Swanee. It's a million lives impacted, not just one or lots of lives impacted. And I know you spent sleepless nights wrestling with these issues. And I know it's sort of, we're past that and you've come through the awful process of reset, reframe, work through it. But it takes some guts when there's no business coming in, not only to batten down the hatches and keep hold of people and pay the salaries and whatever, but also to have the guts to embark on something new, like digitizing your services. I think also you paid an external consultant to give you ideas about how to improve the client experience. So that takes some guts to start investing when you're actually not really earning so much.
Yeah, that's, well, you can see the crisis as something that's crushing you, or you can see it as an opportunity to move forward, and that's exactly what we've done. We've also decided to go with the ISO 9001 quality certification on top of the EGQS that we already held, and that's really giving a purpose to the team, giving a long-term vision. So it's just not keeping afloat, but where's the shore?
Yeah.
So that's really, I think, our role as business leaders, because if we don't provide that to the team, who's going to do it? It's the role of leaders. So it really, that's when you have to shine. So sleepless night, that's for sure. But then if you don't keep the smiling face, you can't expect everybody to keep it with you. So
well, this is a guy who really does reframe the negative into a positive. You'd have had the sleepless nights anyway with a 4-month-old baby. So there you go. I mean, the ISO 9001, that's added to the EGQS qualification, which is a journey to carbon neutrality. That's
as well,
yeah,
yes.
as well.
So that was another opportunity. Well, I was on stage talking about sustainability yesterday, and that's obviously a big topic for our industry. We didn't know what was the new world going to look like. Was remote work going to take over? Obviously, it hasn't, not yet. So we're still thriving and receiving lots of business. I think that's everybody's perspective from that conference, at least. And yeah, it's you got to look forward.
You can look forward. Do you know what? I hadn't realized that Seville was the city, and I only realized this when I went to the cathedral there. And if you haven't visited the cathedral, please try and go before you leave, because there is buried Christopher Columbus. And it was because the whole project of leaving the old world and going to the new world was actually born, and it was effectively they set off from Seville. So this is actually the city where the old world went out to try and discover the new world. And as I say, when you're in that middle period, when you've left the old world, the old shore, and you've not quite yet reached the new world, you're in the middle of choppy waters, and it's very frightening and very stressful. And you've navigated those waters, or you're probably in the process still of navigating
Absolutely.
those waters, but you can see the shore.
Yeah.
I mean, we often hear about disruption. I mean, I've come from sort of Stanford and Silicon Valley, and you disrupt and you break and you iterate and you reiterate and you do this. But as you say, it doesn't always have to be like that. You have not revolutionized what you do, you've optimized what you do. You've increased and added value to the services that you offer to your clients. Now, what services do you think are going to be required by your clients? Do you see that, like, shorter assignments in France, or what do you see happening? What are the changes that you see round the corner?
So there are really heavy shifts in the industry, generational shifts. So making it more digital in terms of services for those younger assignees who want to, look at an app, look at properties on their phone between two meetings while they're flying into France, rather than doing the full-blown accompaniment that we've all been used to, was really how we managed to enter the new world in that sense. And we were pushed to it because everybody was in lockdown, so we had to do it. And that's really where the opportunity sat for me. And you know, I've joined the company when it was 25. Now it's 31 years old. It was founded by my mother. So I was never going to revolutionize it. I was only going to optimize it. And that's what I continued doing during the pandemic. And I think that's what I'll keep doing for the rest of my career.
Well, listen, this is a great story. Félicitations.
Merci.
And I honestly do think that it doesn't always have to be disruption. It can be optimization. What am I doing? How can I do it better? How can I do it even better? Incremental improvement. That also is the answer. Thank you very much for your story, Jeremy. That is really a great story of how they survived. Now, Nouran here has a completely different story, a tough story, because at the beginning of the pandemic, or very soon in, you were made redundant. Well, mentioning no names and no pactual, I mean, you were made redundant. You'd been working on your own for, what was it, 6 months, or before you were made redundant. So already we've got the sort of mental stress of working on your own. Then you were made redundant. Very tough. I mean, unbelievably tough. And one can only hope it was done with the humanity and compassion that one would expect of people who belong to organizations such as this. But what happened to you when you're made redundant in circumstances like that? I mean, did you feel flattened, or did you feel very bleak? Do you feel, I mean, it's a terrible blow for anybody when that happens.
Yeah, it really
Especially
is.
during a pandemic when we're all working from home. There aren't colleagues, there aren't friends around with whom to commiserate. It's a really tough blow.
Yeah, probably that was the most challenging thing, because I'd spent, it was lockdown one, the very start of the pandemic, which I always say I'd spent in solitary confinement in lockdown, and then was made redundant kind of midst lockdown. So yeah, job hunting in a pandemic during lockdown, when I hadn't seen anyone for a while, was, yeah, certainly challenging and tough times. I heard someone once say, never waste a good crisis. And I didn't really know what that meant until I kind of went through the journey myself. So yeah, I spent a couple of months reassessing life on a daily basis, went through numerous different job applications, and reached out to my network, many in this room, in this conference, and was kind of really inspired by lots of great feedback I'd had from people, and contemplated various aspects around my skill set, and really looked at the opportunities around D&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, within the global mobility space. It was an area that, probably similar to sustainability, in the fact that nobody really owned it. It was something that we know is very important. Even during the time that I was unemployed and job hunting, I never stopped networking. So I really made sure to kind of continue to nurture the relationships I had, both in the supplier space, but also with in-house corporates and mobility too. And really decided to kind of join the dots between policy design, and the D&I space, and working with corporate clients directly, but also doing consultancy work with supply chain within the sector. And then, yeah, I set up New Light Consulting, which is my very own consulting company. New and Light is a take on my name, Nouran. It means light in Arabic, for any of the Arabic speakers out there. And yeah, it's definitely been a journey, but I don't think I would have known this particular skill set of mine had I not kind of found myself in this situation.
Well, again, somebody who's shown the courage and the resilience to turn the negative into a positive. So, I mean, this pivot meant that you actually turned to something that you were, in any event, passionate about, but you'd never really leveraged it. Hate that word, American leverage. I use it all the time. Leverage your passion. You leveraged your passion, and actually you've turned it into a business. I mean, I read the other day I get all those motivational quotes, from James Clear, like Atomic Habits and all this thing.
Yeah.
If what you're doing doesn't feel like work,
then
you found your passion.
Yeah.
You get paid for it. Passion, paycheck, purpose. Then you've hit pay dirt. And that seems to be what you've done. Passion, paycheck, purpose. You've found the whole three together.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
wonderful Venn diagram.
Yeah, and it's been, I think it's very easy for us to be kind of put in boxes and in silos in terms of our skill set and expertise. And I think the beauty of going out on my own means I don't have to put myself in a particular box, which people seem to struggle with. I found in my experience, but actually you can enjoy and be good at numerous things. And it's really just about really being passionate and having a lot of integrity in the work that you do. And that, yeah, that's definitely been the best part about it.
Well, join the crew. I mean, it's great being self-employed. Nobody can sack you. And I love it. I mean, like last week, I made myself Employee of the Month. So it just gets better.
I might incorporate that. I might start that for June. Thank you.
Here's the other thing too: the power of the network. And because I mean, I've had the opportunity of talking to you on a one-to-one basis, and you're clearly a people person. I don't know what anybody in this business is doing if they're not a people person. I mean, that goes without saying. But some people are more people persons than other people. Let's just put it like that. So when you sort of nurture your network, it's not out of transactional, immediate quid pro quo. It's just because you just nurture your network, and it's then come back and really helped during this horrible, difficult transition that you've clearly navigated so spectacularly well.
Yeah, that's absolutely been the most kind of humbling, life-changing experiences, is really kind of seeing who sticks around within your network when you're no longer buying the drinks at the bar.
Yeah.
And they have to be bought for you. And yeah, it was really, really spectacular. Just spending time with people beyond kind of the sale or the transactional conversation, but especially during lockdown, was just going through everyone's own stories and journeys and understanding what they were going through, and kind of by accident I got a very good overview of kind of trends and challenges that were going on in the industry. So I was learning about corporates that were rewriting their policies. So I was investigating kind of what they were doing in terms of the pivots of are they looking at remote working? What benefits are they taking away? And that became really powerful information, actually, in terms of how I use that to consult with my supply chain network. So yeah, it's really been a wonderful and very humbling journey.
Do you know what? And we will draw some conclusions at the end of this panel session. But even from the first session that we had this morning about the survive session, it's that a lot of the individuals, when you're doing well in life, you don't think of a lot of things. But people here are talking about learning a bit more humanity, a bit more humility, and a little bit more compassion. And if that helps you in your business life in understanding the people you're dealing with, then I think it's a lesson well learned. You too have navigated a very difficult time in choppy waters, but it seems to me that you can see the brave new world out there as well. So thank you for sharing your story.
Oh no, thank you.
Thank you. Now, James Conigliaro, when I met him, I said, "Are you Italian?" And he says he's got an Italian passport and the family came from Palermo, but he doesn't speak a word of Italian, except to organize a good dinner. So that's worth it. From Dwellworks. Now, tell us what happened to you. I mean, everybody worked from home. Like the whole of Dwellworks went to work from home. That was 350 head count, 17 countries. 1,500 destination consultants. So like a pretty tough steer, pretty tough call. So what did you do next, James? I know that you started to sort of increase your digital content and improve your product offerings. What else were you doing at Dwellworks to make this work for you?
Yeah, so obviously, as with all of us in the room, immediately on one day, everyone was home. Volume plummeted. Active files came to a screeching halt, and we were able to send everyone home and keep everyone employed, which was just important to us, as it was to most of you in the room running your businesses. For Dwellworks, since our founding 15 years ago, we just celebrated our 15-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. Our strategy has always been a build or buy, grow, and then improve strategy. And I think thinking back to previous crises, specifically the Great Recession, 2009, we had a bit of a playbook for how we continue to apply that strategy during the time of a crisis. So we sort of dusted that off and said, how will we continue to do that? From the build or buy perspective, having continued to plant many seeds across clients and their businesses and opportunities to grow, we were able to take some advantage of that. So On the grow side, whether it was build or buy, several of our clients outsourced internal functions to us, outsourced to us. So one of our RMC clients, we completed a deal for them to outsource to us their New York real estate business, which was very much aligned with the business we were already operating successfully there. So expand that group, bring more people onto the team. We also negotiated with Oakwood Corporate Housing, who at that time was exiting their corporate housing solutions business. So the first 2 weeks being home of the pandemic, we were in a scramble to negotiate the outsource and acquisition of the Epic platform, a portfolio of 18 clients whom had been notified that they would no longer receive services from Oakwood on March 31st. So scrambling to sort of get our processes and people in place and hiring talent. So, I mean, the exciting thing was in March 2020, onboarding 60 associates that were former Oakwood employees and giving them an opportunity to come on and work with Dwellworks. And then, as many of you know, last year we acquired a collection of DSPs from Cardis. So we expanded into France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland. So we added geography as well. And again, bringing on dozens and dozens of additional employees during that period. So I think that was all really exciting from the buy and build perspective of our strategy. Growing those and improving them was also something we were able to continue to do and invest in during the years of the pandemic. So like Jeremy, we brought in some external consultants, specifically experts in e-commerce and digitizing our businesses. Just because of circumstance, obviously, as all of the other DSPs in the room, we were forced to deliver services virtually. And while we had some experience doing that in remote places like Yellowknife in Canada, where it's a population of 3,000 people, it's 5,000 kilometers from Toronto, a very remote location. So we had experience doing that on a small scale, but to be able to quickly ramp that up and scale it across our entire global operation was an exciting thing to do. So these consultants, continue to help us to digitize that, bring sort of video technology and other ways of communicating into our destination services platform. And on the corporate housing side, really redesigning the user experience and the customer journey in our technology to bring more of an e-commerce-like experience to delivering the corporate housing services. So I think sort of having that in our DNA, that build, buy, grow, and improve strategy, helped us to really be able to focus and get a lot accomplished during the 2 years of the on and off pandemic. I mean, obviously we're in this environment where I'm not even comfortable saying it's post-pandemic. I mean, it's just sort of living with COVID now, and what we're all experiencing in Europe as well, the stress from moving people out of Russia and Ukraine into some of our countries where volume is so challenging to support. I know, speaking to colleagues and peers in the DS space, just capacity issues, that's for internal staff, for network. What I hoped would be a time of sort of delight and joy for all of our teams post-pandemic is just we're sort of hit with this now.
You did say, and this was something that Ivona mentioned in our first session this morning, talking about how, in a curious sort of way, in a paradoxical sort of way, the pandemic stress tested your systems.
Yeah.
And therefore you improved your system, and therefore the Ukraine war made you more fit for purpose to deal with these issues now in a brutally paradoxical sort of way.
Yeah, that's right. And that it's easy to see from a system and process perspective. We could look at our data, we could see the KPIs, you see that the business is running. But what's more compelling to me was I spent all of last week in the UK visiting our teams there. And we have teams in and around London, in and around Swindon, and then a nice size service center in Truro in Cornwall. So haven't seen these folks since 2019. Zoom just isn't enough to sort of connect with your teams. So to get down to our Truro office, especially where we've been on a mad hiring spree, and just to see the excitement still in our teams. After 2 years of having to work from home in isolation, now the added pressure of all this volume, the sort of pig in the python of work that's activating, that we've had in our backlog for 2 years now, and then throw on all this additional volume and see that they're still passionate about their work. I think you mentioned this on one of the first sessions, Francis, that if you're not passionate about this, you shouldn't be in this business. And it was just touching to me to just see how that passion is still within all of our team members and how they're collaborating and passionate about the customers and service was heartwarming and touching. And
But it's always wonderful to see, but you as a business and you as an individual, I know, recognize that with sort of, if you'd like to share with the conference your concepts of social equity, how does that work within Dwell Work?
Yeah, so it's very much in our culture that we look to the people on our teams to drive some of these things. We've never been sort of a top-down driving a culture and initiatives in our organization. We always think from, even applying things like lean agile methodology and just a culture of inclusion, that we want all of those ideas to come from our teams. So we've got a collection of internal teams. One of them is our ESG and our diversity committee. So our diversity committee, they're such passionate people, either through their personal experience, whether they're LGBTQ or people of color. Many of the women and talented women we've got in our organization coming together, really coming up with ideas for how we have events. I mean, Lynn talked earlier about something Bob Rosing has been working on with hiring, recruiting, talent of color and sort of really bring diversity into our industry, let alone just our company. How could we do all that together? So really sort of from the ground up, or roots of the team, using that approach.
Yeah. Something else that you mentioned when last we spoke, it was about how there's not that you would ever even consider this, but there's far more openness and transparency and honesty now with clients. Like when you say this isn't working, or there's a problem here, or we've got a supply chain issue, there's no sort of even trying to cover it up anymore. Not that anybody ever did, but it's like even now just telling you, and people accept it. People want to know. And that sort of honesty and transparency has now become you've even doubled down on that now, telling people how it is, and they kind of accept it.
Yeah, I think they do accept it. Our RMC partners are struggling just as much as we are with capacity. The corporate clients have a lot of demands. They're trying to retain talent in places like Russia and Ukraine, provide opportunities for them outside of those countries. So the stress comes down from the corporate client to the RMCs and to us, but that two-way communication is critically important. And them understanding when there are capacity challenges, collaborating with our partners. I mean, it's while there may have been walls between us in the past, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really promote that fellowship that Dom talked about on the first day. The fellowship among us is so critically important as suppliers, between us and the RMCs, our networks on the ground, and the corporate clients as well.
So your message to group to thrive and to sort of navigate the choppy waters to see the brave new world is sort of like to focus on the possible. Any other key messages?
Focus on the possible for sure, and be kind. Just seeing people be kind to each other here, our teams be kind to each other, the openness from our RMC clients to work with us. I mean, that kindness is missing, and we've got to keep pushing it forward.
So focus on the possible, increased flexibility, increased personalized solutions, better employer and service provider. So you've learned a lot of lessons. Congratulations, and thanks for sharing your story with us today. Now, Louise, you've got a really, really interesting story here, because you've been talking, James, about onboarding people during the middle of a pandemic. It's kind of difficult. Like you're used to, when you're interviewing people or being interviewed, all those subtle hints of body language, this and that and the other. All the 90% of non-verbal signals that give you a few clues about people. Those are kind of missing when you do sort of virtual interviews. What was your challenge, Louise, and how did you step up to the challenge?
I mean, I'm actually not a very good speaker, and actually being on camera is pretty scary. So I had to fight that myself. And lucky enough, my wonderful husband is a bit IT orientated and blurred my screen. And then we've got someone in my IT department to create this fantastic backdrop. And you think, right, that's looking very professional. And then try and start coaching clients as well as candidates in how to interview. I'm a real people person, so actually trying to educate virtually was a huge challenge. So I kind of overcame the camera shyness, and I've probably done about 3,000 meetings now on camera. So what I started to do, and I did kind of recognise that when interviewing candidates, they were really nervous of the camera, and they didn't really understand how to talk and relax. And, you know, I like trying to understand what a corporate really wants culturally for their new hire is hard. So I had to try and educate candidates in how to be their natural self, but be professional in their lounge, their dining room, or their bedroom. So one of the key things was blur your background, you know, always have a lipstick, you know, brush your hair. I don't care what you wear underneath, but make sure you're professional. And then the tricks of the trade, because it's hard to be professional in your bedroom or in your dining room. So have little bits of paper, bullet points, have your CV. And when I was educating my team, you know, with the years of experience I have with a lot of companies here that use my services, it was for me and my team to really educate the candidate, the culture of that company. And that was a real challenge, so they could really understand what they were going into. Then the other side of the education was educating our corporates and clients how to interview virtually and what to look out for. So our big challenge was trying to pair those two together. I mean, we had some fun. I mean, there were some disasters.
Well, come on, tell. Go on, do tell.
Well, there's been breastfeeding. I've had breastfeeding. I'm like, tilt the camera. Just do that bit. You know, there's been some moments, and there's also been some amazing moments.
Yeah, it's very difficult for a prospective, well, for an interviewee, a prospective employee, to get a measure of the culture of a company. So really, you also had your work cut out in trying to explain to companies who are in the business of trying to hire how they should present themselves. I mean, there are a few disasters there, weren't there? Sort of prospective employers not really knowing how to manage the virtual conferencing.
I mean, I think, yeah, it has been a challenge. I think the biggest, contribution that my business has done is really educate our corporates and definitely the HR side of the business, because they're still having a challenge. And when this happened on the 23rd of March, everything went digital. And people who know me, I'm scared of IT, I hate it. But it was making sure that they had an onboarding policy and how they onboarded. And so a candidate who's sitting at home, who was used to be, you know, in a work environment, and then suddenly, you know, they want to move on and get another new job, and they haven't changed those four walls. And that was a real challenge. And I'll tell you a little story. So I'm here with my daughter, Lucy, and she's a really bright cookie, joined an incredible company as a an architect solutions specialist in the what was it, Lucy? Intelligent workspace. And I and my husband started to see her mentally decline. She wasn't being socially interacted. And that was really tough to see your daughter suffer. And then she used to come to my office, can I sit there and be part of that team? Yes, if you're quiet. My team is really quite loud and interviewing the whole time. And, but, you know, she needed to bounce off us and get this energy. And she didn't get it, and she got very depressed, she suffered quite a lot mentally. So I offered her a job, and she has incredible people skills for someone so young. And she's now, you know, part of the team, and she's brought a different dimension to the team, which is fantastic.
But this has also given you another insight that was helping you with your work. That you
Absolutely.
identified that a lot of employers and companies are making the mistake of not engaging with their remote sort of hybrid workers. And clearly you saw it being played out in your daughter's case, with very negative consequences. So have you educated employers and companies in the need to reach out and keep people, whatever it is they do, drinks on a Friday, I don't know, what sort of interventions did you suggest?
We've suggested many things. So in the very beginning, a lot of corporates that were doing like the town hall, the end of the Friday afternoon, doing quizzes and sending, I got involved in a kind of a company that did kind of cocktails and send them out to their team. And it was really engaging. But what I did suggest to a lot of the corporates is, you know, have a buddy for a new hire and really try and engage with them. And, you know, at some stage, you will be back together. And that was really important. But one of the key things that we worked with one particular HR company, an HR department, every time we recruited someone, we keep following up, making sure that they're okay. And there was one particular candidate was pretty down, and I was mortified. And I said, "What's wrong? I haven't really been given enough about my training. You know, have I made the wrong mistake?" And you know, one call to HR, and I said, "Right, you need to act and be proactive on this." And we do that all the time now. Keep making sure that these people are looked after. 2.5 years now gone, we still have this remote working and hybrid model, and they're being forgotten still. We are still recruiting virtually, and it's the new norm. It isn't. You still got to make sure that you're educating your new hires virtually or hybrid model. They need to feel part of the team. And I think the biggest challenge for you corporates is trying to educate them through, you know, your culture, your mission and vision. That's really tough virtually.
It's tough. I mean, I think probably the problem resides as increasingly some people do come back physically to in-person work. You think, oh, great, we're back to where we were. And yet, the upside has been that companies have been able to recruit talent further afield that prior to this, they would never have been able to do or wouldn't have been inclined to do. But then they get forgotten about in their further afield field. So what are you doing to kind of impress upon companies that, yes, you may have some people in person back in the office, but we don't forget the people out there?
It's a remote model. I mean, so there's pros and cons. The positives for this unfortunate pandemic for corporates, they're having to, or they are able to obtain talent a lot further afield. So that's a real massive tick. Don't forget them.
Yeah.
But then, when you do come back, you've signed the contract for making sure they can work remotely, and you want them back in the office. Well, that's not going to happen.
No.
You know, there's so many different things and still so many unknowns for the workforce. But yeah, I mean, I love it because I get to speak to so many people around the world without having to travel. I'm on various time zones. I've probably done maybe 25,000 miles in one day. Talking to various people.
There's something still that intrigues me. Getting the cultural fit. I mean, it's still a bit of a lottery when you sort of interview people and their CVs are stellar and they present very well, and this is in person. They go to and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work, right? When it's virtual, it's even more difficult. How do you, just this is for prospective employers and employees here, what are you looking for? What are the danger signals or what are the plus signals that you identify?
God, dear, there's so many.
Yeah.
So many. So, I mean, I see thousands of CVs.
Yeah.
And I can instantly tell if someone's good for the job or not. I just know that from 33 years of recruiting. So my job is, and I do so much coaching and educating at all levels up to CEOs, and that is unbelievable. they don't get many jobs, they don't job hop. So I can't rewrite a CV. It's such a personal document. So what I've been doing, see, so many people are basically told, well, I've only got to have 2 pages or 1-page CV. Oh, I've got a booklet. And there's no happy medium, but the most important thing when I am interviewing, we go through a really thorough interview and what their job is. Because I know the mobility sector, I know what I'm looking for. So we go through that really finely. I said, right, you just rewrite it, send it back, and your LinkedIn profile is as important as your CV. So make sure you have that same kind of contact, because there's, as you know, so many jobs out there. If you want to be, headhunted or picked from a client, you've got the right keywords. So we do so much consulting.
Those are kind of the tangibles, and yeah, you can coach people in that. But somebody once said to me, do you know what the big mistake recruiters and employers often make is they recruit for qualifications and then they hope the attitude will come, whereas you should recruit for attitude and we can qualify you up to a certain extent. Obviously not if you're going to be a brain surgeon. But how do you remotely figure out what a person's attitude is? I mean, clearly if people say, I'm passionate about this job and they're busy, like playing snooker or darts while they're talking to you, you know that that's nonsense. But how do you honestly get it's very difficult to sort of ascertain a person's attitude remotely.
You can't, but it's about your questioning, and that's the key thing. I've got such a fabulous team. We're quite mature, and I always start from the very beginning of their career. Their actual soft skills, believe it or not, are so important, and that is, did they do a sport? What is their interests? And I always bring that out first, and then I start building this profile up of this individual. I will know instantly, and don't ask me why, but I do, if they're right for that job or not. But there's lots of other companies that I can probably match them to. But it is hard, but it is about, you're a good interviewer, it's about extracting information, and that's what I'm good at. I know how to do it.
The feel of it.
Yeah, I've just got the feel of people and and then, and if they're not right, and if we can't help them, I still have to give back. So we really coach them and get a really good CV. And there was one particular guy who was recommended to speak to me, and I knew I couldn't help him, but I said, well, look, and I managed his expectations, and we went through his CV. Then I said, right, you call me when you've got an interview, let's go through it, and we really helped him. So, that was all for free. It's about giving back.
So listen, we've only got a couple of minutes, and these are standalone stories, so unless there's any absolute, compelling questions that what you want to ask, and please feel free, because I'd like to wind up really, every one of you have got a different story to tell. But if you could just spend a moment, and then I'm going to ask you, what would be your one piece of advice for somebody who is going through this, having this liminal stage, as I say, having left the shore, choppy waters, looking forward to the brave new world, and have had to change your business model and the way you do things, and have obviously come out at the other side with terrific success stories to tell. What do you think is the key attribute that you have, that you personally have, that saw you through that very difficult transition?
Well, personally, I think being able to project yourself into the positive was what really made it possible for me. All the stories we've been telling this morning are all heroes' journeys. So it's dark out there. We don't see the other side, but you have to keep faith in everything is going to be okay and look into the positive.
No, as we say, it's not what happens to you, it's how you elect to deal with it. But it is sometimes very difficult to have that optimistic view, and that's when you need the network and the friends and the support to help you through that bad patch, and a hand that picks you up and sees you through the dark periods. And what would you say, Nouran, the key attribute that saw you through?
I think we talk about resilience a lot, but my goodness, I think I thought I was resilient pre-pandemic, and I've really, really learned resilience, and really being able to pick yourself up when things do feel a bit bleak is key. Having that fighting spirit, but also not being afraid to reach out and speak. I think, that's really important. And if people, I can only begin to imagine how many people have struggled or suffered during the last 2 years, and not all of us have kind of put their hands up for help, which is something I traditionally used to be very bad at. But every time I did put my hand up for help, I was met with unbelievable love, support, affection, and numerous gin and tonics on demand when I asked for them. And they always helped during the dark times. So yeah, always speak to people.
James, what would you say? What key attribute do you think is
Yeah,
through in?
I'd say simply the humility to know that you don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
that there are experts out there, and talk to people and the flip side of that, the willingness to be open to others as well, which I would invite anybody to do, to any of us up here or certainly at Dwellworks.
And you, Louise, what would you say the key attribute that saw you through?
Don't forget your employees and just be human, call them. And if you are recruiting, just think outside the box. I'm always available. I'm always a person who will introduce and give. And just be your normal selves, because this digital age is here to stay. And you've got to learn how to communicate via camera. So I'm always happy to help. I've done so much coaching over these few years. So just be your natural self and just be human, be adaptable.
Well, drawing the threads of this one, I would say humility and humanity and a sense of humour and lots of gin and tonic. Thank you very much indeed for a fabulous session. Louise and James and Nouran and Jeremy, thank you.